Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a close look at a critical issue, one that's really causing deep concern and tension across communities in California. We're talking about the actions of masked, unidentified federal agents during immigration enforcement. Our mission here is to extract the most important insights from, well, a stack of sources detailing recent incidents. We want to confront the profound questions these operations raise about trust, accountability, and frankly, public safety. So you're about to hear about specific, often chaotic confrontations, the complex legal realities involved, and why local leaders are grappling with a problem that seems to have no easy answers.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, if we look beyond just the individual incidents, is how they kind of coalesce. They paint a picture of escalating challenges. We'll be exploring not just what happened in these instances, but really why these very specific tactics, the masks, the unmarked cars, are creating such significant impact on local law enforcement and, maybe more importantly, on the communities they serve. It feels like it's about a foundational shift, how authority is perceived and whether trust can even exist when you don't know who you're dealing with.
The incidents themselves are, well, alarming. But to really grasp the gravity here, we need to first understand the core issue. These increasingly aggressive immigration raids, led by masked federal agents, often in unmarked vehicles, they aren't just random events. It seems they're systematically undermining local law enforcement and community relations. Take, for example, the chaos that erupted recently in Bell, California. Just try to picture the scene. Masked men, witnesses said they were wearing military-style fatigues, balaclavas, carrying long weapons. They suddenly descend upon a local car wash. Right away, they begin detaining workers. And this isn't quiet. It instantly sparks a heated confrontation with residents, with advocates who rush to the scene. The video from that day is pretty chilling. It shows these agents actually firing tear gas into the crowd to disperse people who are simply questioning their identities. You can hear shouts like, "Are you a bounty hunter? How much is the bounty for an illegal right now?" It's just a snapshot of pure confusion and escalating fear when nobody knows who's behind the mask.
And it's precisely that kind of volatile interaction that puts local police in, well, an impossible position. What's really crucial to understand here is that local law enforcement agencies often have little, maybe no advance insight into where or when these federal actions are even taking place. Yet they are the ones left dealing with the immediate aftermath, the protests, the public outcry, the urgent, often angry questions from residents. This situation is so precarious that, as our sources point out, local officers themselves have been directly mistaken for these federal agents. Just think about that for a second. This single issue, this lack of clear identification, is, and this is a quote, eroding years of work to have immigrant communities trust the police. All that effort, potentially undone.
Yeah, and we saw this play out in Fontana too, right? About an hour inland from LA. Officers there were investigating a completely unrelated residential burglary, just routine local police work. But because of this pervasive fear and confusion around federal operations, rumors just exploded on social media that these local officers were actually federal immigration agents. Fontana Police Chief Michael Dorsey, he had to issue a public statement. He is expressing serious concern. He stated, and I'm quoting him directly here, "It is not safe for our officers or for others involved in any active police operations if misrepresentations or misunderstandings lead to inappropriate engagement." Actually. So this isn't just about PR, it's about officer safety. It's about the integrity of their local police work.
Indeed. It really exposes a dangerous vulnerability for local police, doesn't it? When residents can't tell the difference between local officers who they might know, who are accountable to the community, and these unidentified federal agents who seem to operate outside that system, well, every interaction becomes fraught. Fraught with potential misunderstanding, potential danger. It means a simple traffic stop, or investigating a noise complaint could suddenly be seen through the lens of a federal raid. And that breeds distrust and potentially leads to really dangerous confrontations for those local officers.
But it isn't just about misunderstandings, though, is it? When armed, masked individuals refuse to identify themselves, it absolutely begs the question, who are these people? Yeah, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. She raised this exact point after agents were seen staging outside Dodger Stadium. She really articulated the public's bewilderment. She said, and this is a powerful quote, "They show up without uniforms. They show up completely masked. They refuse to give ID. And frankly, the vests that they have on look like they ordered them from Amazon." And then she asks, are they bounty hunters? Are they vigilantes? If they're federal officials, why is it they do not identify themselves? That question coming from a major city leader, it just underscores the deep public confusion and concern here.
It's such a critical point. Because in a free society, the public's ability to identify and then hold accountable those who wield coercive power, That's fundamental, right? When that basic principle is undermined by masked identities, by unmarked vehicles, it doesn't just create anxiety, it creates a real sense of powerlessness among people. It chips away at the very fabric of how a community interacts with law enforcement. It makes it almost impossible to distinguish legitimate authority from, well, something else entirely, something maybe more sinister.
Okay, so these chaotic, often frightening scenes, they immediately raise a critical, unsettling question for communities. If these are federal agents, how are they held accountable? Because our deep dive reveals a pretty significant legal and operational gap. It seems to allow federal agents to operate with a level of autonomy that local law enforcement simply does not share. And that creates a real blind spot for local communities and their leaders.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes clear there's a distinct legal framework in play here. Ed Obayashi, he's a Northern California deputy and a respected use of force expert. He articulates it very starkly. He states, I'm quoting him directly, federal agents can do what they want in their official capacity.
Mm.
He emphasizes that if they point a gun at someone or take them into custody, local police cannot step in and interfere regardless of the circumstances. Now that's a significant insight. It means local authorities, the ones accountable to their communities through elections, through local oversight boards, they're essentially powerless to intervene, even when federal actions are causing chaos or confusion or just public outrage right in their own jurisdiction.
That is a profound difference, isn't it? It suggests a completely different standard of operation happening on the ground.
It absolutely does, and this raises a really important question about oversight, or maybe the lack of it, from a local perspective. Obayashi further notes that while, yes, federal agencies do have extensive use of force policies, and on paper, they're robust, ultimately, when it comes to the operations on the ground. Well, he says, if Homeland Security says this is what we want, the policy guidelines when it comes to gun and force doesn't matter. Ling delightus. This highlights a really stark difference in accountability. Federal agents, he points out, are not subject to the same statutes as local police, namely Section 1983 claims. That's the law allowing people to sue certain government agencies and employees for violating their civil rights. And the U.S. Supreme Court, Obayashi adds, has repeatedly shielded federal agents from legal repercussions.
Okay, so just to make that crystal clear for our listener, this means if a local police officer violates your civil rights, you might have a pathway, a legal path, to sue them or their agency under Section 1983. But if a federal agent does the same thing, that legal avenue is significantly narrower, maybe doesn't exist at all in the same way. That feels like a massive distinction when we talk about accountability.
Exactly. It creates a much higher bar for accountability for federal actions. It stems from distinct legal doctrines, things that historically grant federal agencies broader powers, often justified for national security objectives or, interstate enforcement. This framework, while maybe designed for specific federal mandates, it creates a unique and, frankly, frustrating challenge at the local level. That's where communities expect immediate, tangible accountability for all law enforcement interactions they witness.
Right. And here's where it gets really unsettling. The potential for actual danger when identification is obscured and accountability is so unclear. Think about that viral video incident in Pasadena. It captured the attention of millions. Broad daylight. A man steps out of an unmarked vehicle, busy intersection. He then unholsters his pistol, aims it at pedestrians who are just standing there using their iPhones. Then he gets back in his car, turns on red and blue emergency lights, and just speeds off. This wasn't some shadowy nighttime operation. It happened right out in the open in front of bewildered residents and, initially, equally bewildered local authorities.
And that really gets to the core of the problem, doesn't it? Pasadena Police Chief Gene Harris described that initial chaos perfectly. He said there's no way for us to verify who this person was at first. Now, they later said they were able to determine that to the best of our estimation, he was an ICE agent. But then he adds, we will not look into it any deeper than that.
That last part is, well, it's particularly troubling, I think. It suggests once they thought it might be federal, their investigation essentially just stopped.
And add another layer of concern here, the vehicle's license plate. It was what's known as a cold plate, untraceable. This is typically a tool used in highly sensitive undercover criminal operations, not, you would assume, for highly visible public encounters in broad daylight. So you have a masked, unidentified individual driving an untraceable vehicle pointing a gun at citizens, and once he's possibly identified as federal, local police feel they can't or won't investigate further. It's just a complete dead end for any kind of public inquiry.
Pasadena Mayor Victor Gordo, he articulated the core concern perfectly when he stated, and I quote him, "One question, is this a law enforcement agent or someone pretending to be a law enforcement agent? And there is no good answer here." He went on to add that To have a law enforcement agent draw his weapon and point it towards someone using their iPhone in a crowd is showing a lack of training and a lack of temperance in the use of force.
Hmm.
So this incident, whether as a federal agent or someone brazenly impersonating one, it deeply unsettles the community. It raises serious questions about appropriate use of force, about operational conduct. It makes it nearly impossible for citizens to trust what they're seeing on their own streets.
This ambiguity, this simple inability to tell who is who, it creates a truly dangerous vacuum. Huntington Park Mayor Arturo Flores captured this fear so vividly. He asked, "What happens if you have bad actors who decide to throw on an olive drab outfit and go around abducting people?"
Uh-huh.
He fears, quote, "there's a tragedy waiting to happen." And that's the chilling reality, isn't it? This situation puts residents constantly on edge, making it incredibly difficult for them to distinguish legitimate federal law enforcement from potential vigilantes, opportunistic criminals, or maybe even extremists who might take advantage of the confusion.
It feels like a complete breakdown of what people rely on for public safety. The very symbols of authority, uniforms, badges, marked cars, they become suspect. And that fundamentally alters how a community interacts with anyone claiming to be law enforcement. If you can't trust who's pulling up in an unmarked car or whose face is behind that mask, then a really critical layer of public order just dissolves. The fear of bad actors, it isn't hypothetical. It seems like a direct consequence of this lack of transparency and accountability.
And then, compounding all this confusion is the advice, or maybe the contradictory advice, given to citizens. Chief Harris, in that same interview about the Pasadena incident, he says if citizens encounter someone impersonating law enforcement, they should absolutely call 911. Okay, that seems like sound advice on its own. However, in pretty much the very next breath, he also states that local police will not interfere with federal activities, which effectively tells citizens they need to, quote, defer to their own feelings, understand what's going on around them, end quote. That's an impossible and incredibly dangerous position to put anyone in. You're expecting them to self-assess a potentially life-threatening situation with masked, armed individuals and determine on their own, is this a legitimate federal operation or is this a criminal impersonation?
Yeah.
That's asking way too much.
It really highlights the dire need for some kind of clear, unified protocol, doesn't it? When even local law enforcement leaders feel forced to give such paradoxical advice, it just underscores the systemic disconnect, the vacuum of clear policy. The public is left vulnerable without reliable guidance in situations that can be genuinely terrifying. This isn't just about policy, it's about practical safety on the streets.
So what we've truly uncovered in this deep dive is, well, it's a growing and dangerous predicament. You have federal agents operating under masks without clear identification. You have a profound lack of transparency with local authorities. And you have a legal framework that seems to shield them from the same accountability as local police. It's a complex picture, definitely, but the threads all seem to lead to one central point: the erosion of public trust.
And this isn't merely about the specifics of immigration enforcement, although that's where these particular incidents seem to originate. This feels much bigger. It's about the fundamental relationship between communities and authority itself. When citizens cannot readily identify who is detaining them or who is pointing a weapon at them or even who is operating on their streets, it profoundly erodes public trust. No question. This creates pervasive fear, it fosters suspicion, and as Mayor Flores rightly put it, it opens the door for genuinely dangerous misunderstandings. Or, even worse, the actions of actual bad actors, maybe vigilantes, operating under that cloak of ambiguity. The ability to identify those in authority is just a cornerstone of public safety and a just society. And right now, that cornerstone seems to be visibly cracking.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as these incidents continue to unfold across California and potentially elsewhere? How important is visible identification and clear, demonstrable accountability for anyone who wields the power of enforcement in a free society? And maybe, what are the broader implications when a portion of law enforcement operates so far in the shadows, leaving communities and even other police forces completely in the dark? It's definitely something to ponder, because the answer could really shape the future of public safety and the very nature of trust in your own community.